So welcome everybody to this Just Fashion webinar covering circularity, regulatory and standards landscape in the fashion clothing and clothing sector. This particular webinar is delivered by myself, Martin Charter, with support from my colleague Virginie from the Centre for Sustainable Design at UCA. And within the series of webinars that we're going to be running within the Just Fashion project, we are collaborating with the PSI, and we have Sarah on the line to help support on questions later on. We also have other colleagues, Annick and Paz from Just Fashion on the line, again, to support on questions on the project later on. So without further ado, I think we'll crack on. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. Please, stay muted and perhaps keep your cameras off just to resolve, avoid any potential bandwidth types of issues. And please post any questions in the chat. Again, another proviso. This webinar is based on quite diligent research completed within our team, but I or my team are not lawyers. So any action you take as a result of anything that you pick up in this webinar is at your own volition. So we cannot be held liable for any actions taken as a result of what you've heard. So I think without further ado, we'll move on to the next and the first slide indeed. So the Just Fashion project is a European funded project from Horizon 2020 led by University of Antwerp with approximately 20 partners throughout Europe. And really it's sort of mapping sustainability, climate change related issues in the fashion and clothing sector. It's testing circular business models, notably working with 6 pilots and also developing a series of tools. And our role at UCN, the Centre for Sustainable Design, is to track and map the regulatory and standards development within the project. So next slide, please. So the context for the developments related to the textiles and clothing sector is in 2015, we had the first Circular Economy Action Plan. That was then followed by the second Circular Economy Action Plan in 2020 that started to broaden the scope of particularly the products that the European Commission was most interested in, for a variety of perspectives. And what was most notable for this from the second action plan was the announcement that some regulation would be launched under initially called the Sustainable Products Initiative, if I remember rightly, that became ESPR, and also the European Strategy for Sustainable and Circular Textiles. That latter one, the Strategy for Circular and Sustainable Textiles, really is a roadmap. Is not binding, but it set the road or journey for the Commission to start to explore these issues. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned there, the Circular Economy Action Plan 2.0, if you like, 2020, really aimed to make sustainability more mainstream in the marketplace, and that built on sort of 20 years of the Commission looking at policy developments from something called integrated product policy to work around sustainable consumption and production. But essentially, this is the latest, integration, policy. And the main key point here is that the Commission really highlighted its intention to look much more broadly outside of the traditional sectors they had looked at in terms of so eco design, circularity, expanding on top of the work originally on electronics and vehicles and packaging, to particularly bring in topics such as textiles from a sector point of view, but on a materials point of view to do more work around plastics, for example. Next slide, please. And one of the flagships that is a quite significant piece of regulation is the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, which is a framework directive and is, in my opinion, quite a significant development. It was passed in July 2024, and effectively it brings in a series of components to take forward the mainstream of circularity, and it expands. Can you just go a slide back, please? And it really builds on the existing Eco Design Directive that was passed in 2009 that focused on the electronic sector. So you can look at it that a lot of the aspects in the Eco Design Directive are now being taken across into other sectors, and actually the requirements are being expanded. Next slide, please. The ESPR, has a range of headings in terms of product sustainability, consumer engagement, but I won't go through those in detail for time. So next slide, please. So highlighting the importance and changes compared to the existing regulation, this scope extension. At least in theory, the Commission has brought in the fact that it may bring in policy across any product, any sector. So it's massively expanding the potential scope of the directive. It brings in new requirements. It generates the idea of a horizontal approach in certain areas, which you'll come back to, and particularly an increase in focus around product-based environmental information in terms of the topic, particularly of digital product passports and labels. Next slide, please. So there are really 5 core components to the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. Some elements of this are clearer than others, but in some areas it's quite difficult to precisely find out what the Commission's plans are at present, but we've done our best to try and get behind a number of these elements here. So next slide, please. So, as mentioned, ESPR is a framework legislation. There's a range of research activity going on within the JRC, and the JRC effectively is the Commission's team that really evaluates a lot of issues pre-legislative development. They are preparing the grounds for legislation, and essentially a process then is in place whereby the development is taken to a stage, and then that particular document is then passed through something called the Eco Design Forum that provides feedback to the Commission. And within that context, then the next key stage is adoption of the measure and the enforcement of the measures after brought in at a sort of member state level. Next slide, please. So the Eco Design Forum, there was a version of this linked to the Eco Design Directive that focused on energy-related products, but essentially it's a consultative forum that is made up of multiple different types of stakeholders that will bring in perspectives on potential policy, and feedback then is fed into that policy development, into working plans, etc. So I believe the first meeting was held in February this year, and there are other meetings planned this year. Next slide, please. So there are 2 key elements to the eco-design for sustainable products, eco-design requirements that align to the product-based regulations. There are performance requirements and informational requirements. And the performance requirements link not to just one focus area, which applied in the Eco-Design Directive for energy-related products, which is reducing energy consumption of products. There is now potentially 16 different requirements that are highlighted in the annex to the regulation that the Commission may choose after analysis to align within appropriate regulations. Next slide, please. The information requirements linked to DPP, labels, substances of concern, and the performance requirements are, within those 16 elements are both qualitative and quantitative. Next slide, please. So these are the different, requirements, and one of the areas that will need to be considered further down the line when different requirements are aligned to different product-based regulations is areas like testing, for example. So how will we test, for example, for durability of textiles? And so there'll be a need for standards and protocols that will need to be taken into testing, whether it's in-house or a third-party laboratories. Next slide, please. Sorry, back one slide, important point. So what they have also highlighted in the regulation is there will be horizontal measures. So they've highlighted across all product categories, repairability will likely be a consideration. But rather confusingly, although this is stated as a horizontal measure across all products or markets, they've highlighted that recycled content of electrical, of EEE products might be included. Now, for me, I personally think that's a specific, let's say it's a vertical rather than horizontal. So I'm not really entirely sure what they mean by that. But this is stated in the ESPR, specific stuff related to recycled content for electronic products. Next slide, please. So there is a whole timeline on this that runs through to 2027, 2028, with potentially the adoption of the first product-based regulation for the priority sectors of end user products, which they've identified as textiles and clothing, and for intermediary products they've identified as iron and steel. So this isn't the future, but there is a lot of work going on with the Commission on this area at the moment. Next slide, please. So a key document to review to bring yourselves up to date with what the plans are for the future is the ESPR and Energy Labelling Working Plan. That is about a 10-page document that really highlights the key specific developments for the future and some of the areas that the Commission is considering. So, for example, related back to that topic of horizontal measures, the Commission is looking at, as I mentioned, repairability, but they're also exploring some of the scoring mechanisms that are out there and indices. And I believe that there are other indices and scoring mechanisms being developed in topics such as durability. Next slide, please. So the product-based regulations, that incorporate eco-design requirements. There was a significant piece of research by the JRC that went through a whole series of criteria to define the product categories that were, that fulfilled the highest priority in terms of actions. And coming out of that, at the top of the list for final products were textiles and apparel, and in intermediate products there's iron and steel. So there's a lot of work that was done to identify and determine those products. So they have specified other products, but we've been particularly focusing on textiles and apparel, so we're unclear on the stage of development of the other sectors, but there are plans to take other activities forward. So next slide, please. So there are product exclusions, as we understand it, that were included in the working plan. So detergents, paints and lubricants, footwear and chemicals have been excluded. Footwear was included with textiles and apparel, but has been sort of taken out as a specific separate category at the moment. We believe that a study is being commissioned to particularly look at footwear. Next slide, please. So as highlighted, textiles and clothing, and there is a fairly fluid definition by the Commission, textiles, clothing, fashion, and stating end products. So is textiles a raw material and clothing an end product? Again, some of the terminology, even at a high level, it can be a little bit confusing, but we believe they primarily mean clothing and fashion products. So there's a set of reasons why they highlighted textiles, high improvement potential, significant market, and major environmental impact, not just within Europe, but globally and throughout the supply chain. Next slide, please. So as highlighted, the JRC, the Joint Research Centre, has been working for some time now on a preparatory study with a lot of detailed research going on. And as we understand it, they have defined clothing and textiles as including products where there is 80% textile fiber content within those final products. So there's a series of products that are in scope, and there's a series of products that are out of scope. And again, good to read the working plan to clarify this. So as we understand it, they are looking at not just the product-based, preparatory work for the product-based regulations, but also for in relation to criteria for green public procurement and eco labels. Next slide, please. So there is within the JRC activities, there is a series of stages to their research, and they now, as we understand it, are at task 5, and there's a series of other stages to go in the preparatory work. It appears that a number of the initiatives under the Eco Design for Sustainable Products regulations are getting delayed. So, this is something that we're trying to monitor and connect up with the JRC to see precisely where they are. But that's our best understanding based on information we've been able to find. Next slide, please. So the aim, as we understand it, is to finish the preparatory study this year, stages tasks 5 to 7, and then move into the final stages in 2026, which include different design operations with a view to, for example, producing a delegated act. Our understanding is that mid-2027, the aim is to introduce the regulation with a 18-month period for member states to implement the late regulation within their own national systems. Next slide, please. So next element of the Eco Design for Sustainable Products is digital product passports. And next slide, please. And I should state up front that as at this moment in time, the European Commission has not stated specifically what will be within a European digital product passport. So that has not been communicated yet by the European Commission. So anybody that's coming to you as a textiles, supplier, stating that they can provide you with a service to comply with EU DPP regulations is talking out of their hat. So be very careful if you're in the business in this area. Second point is, however, there is extensive activity with over 200 stakeholders engaged in a European standards development around the information architecture for digital product passports. So digital product passports from the Commission's perspective is a digital tool to provide comprehensive and transparent information covering a product's life cycle effectively. And there will be various means to do that. There are digital tools out there in the marketplace that a number of companies have been working on, but just to highlight again, anybody that claims they have a tool to comply with the DPP from a European regulatory point of view, be very careful of. Another key recent point that highlighted in the working plan is that, and I'll read this just directly, information to be collected and made available in the digital product passport will be specified in the product specific delegated acts under ESPR and with potential additional regulations. So effectively, it appears that the DPP, for example, will be aligned to the delegated act for textiles and clothing. So originally thought they were going to be horizontal, but then as our understanding, they will be aligned very much to the delegated acts and therefore likely to have key linkages to the relevant product requirements that will be specified in the delegated act for textiles and clothing. So as we understand it, again, the announcement over what is in a digital product passport is being delayed to 2026. Next slide, please. I think we can skip over that. So the other key element linked to this issue of communication is the Commission communicated and undertook a consultation that finished in July, just very recently, at the beginning of the month, that really was consulting around stakeholders' views on how data is to be stored and managed by service providers. So again, the Commission is picking up this issue in terms of service providers around DPP. As we understand it very broadly, at least the idea conceptually is there will be designated suppliers at a member state level of digital product passport services, and those people will be kept on some form of database. But again, a lot of these things are still emerging and are not crystal clear. But there was over 250 responses to this, with the highest number coming from Germany. Next slide. So there is also a series of standards in addition to the very active CEN JTC 24 standards group. There is a number of other standards developments going on linked to ISO and other organizations. So other countries are, or other, let's say, international standards bodies are picking this up. And I believe that also China is putting together some strong plans or programs related to what they are calling digital product passports. Again, the key issue here will be, to get some sort of consensus around the heading and the topic, because the danger is, Europe digital product passport might be different from China digital product passport. And if a European company has to, communicate down to its supply chains in China, and the terminology is very different, then there is going to be some confusion. Next slide, please. So again, the process for the JTC 24 is well developed at the moment, and there are, I believe there are standards that are, ready to be, circulate very, very closely. I've seen a note pop up. We will provide a link to the recording of this this presentation, which will also include the slides. We won't provide the slides separately. Next slide, please. So within the JTC 24, there are 4 working groups dealing with, a series of very complicated issues associated with the digital product passport from the IT infrastructure point of view. Next slide, please. So next component of the SPR is a statement, policy around the destruction of unsold goods. Next slide, please. So the aim of this particular policy development is to, remove the widespread practice of destroying unsold goods, and this particularly has an impact on the clothing sector, and will primarily apply to large companies from July next year. Next slide, please. So there are different elements to this, as we understand it. There's an implementing act that will specify the different product categories that will come under this particular regulation, and there will be delegated acts that highlight the exemptions. But as we understand it, these regulations are primarily going to be focused on the larger organizations. Next slide, please. The other element, one of the other components, is green public procurement, and many of us who've been involved around the policy area of the Commission around, let's say, call it product-based policy for some time, have seen other proposals over time linked to green public procurement that have not necessarily landed or been fully implemented, although activities has happened at a member state level. They haven't been implemented in law, such as has happened in Japan, going back quite a long time ago. So there is a proposal for mandatory green public procurement that includes, a series of rules for particular product categories, but that will need to be verifiable, in terms of information provision. But the specific regulatory plans for this are unclear at the moment. Next slide, please. And I may have to move through some of this other information quite quickly, so we get enough time for questions. So substances of concern are also highlighted, and there seems to be, and clearly the use of chemicals is quite significant in relation to the clothing and textile sector at different parts of within different parts of the value chain and different parts of the processes and within different types of products. So the proposals seem to align quite closely to topics related to REACH, but also other regulations as well. They're also picking up the topic of the linkage to substances that may hinder reuse and recycling. So this is a topic that is emerging. Next slide, please. So, again, I won't go through the details of this, other than it appears, although REACH is a separate regulation, that these substances of concern are quite closely aligned to REACH, and we hope that there'll be more clarity over the specific aspects of the substances of concern that are new or different in terms of information requirements, etc. We hope that starts to emerge a bit more clearly in the near future. Next slide, please. So there is apparently a revised framework for REACH that is, going ahead, that is trying to modernize, simplify, and bring into a national level. And as we understand it, there will be a timeline for the publication of something by the fourth quarter 2025. Next slide, please. So whilst REACH is not exclusively linked to textiles, there are a number of chemicals and restrictions that will impact on clothing and textiles producers. So we recommend that any companies, whether large or small, keep their eye on developments in this area, as it's quite complicated. Next slide, please. So again, next slide, please. So so for any companies, again, trying to sort of track the implications of ESPR for their products, some actionable steps, particularly for SMEs, although it is into the future, all the indications are this regulations is coming. And again, clothing and textile sector haven't had these sorts of regulations that, for example, the electronics, the packaging and automotive sector has faced before, though those sectors have been through various iterations of regulations. So they are, prepared for these types of issues. But for this sector, many of these issues will be new. So some of the issues to start to think about are, for example, starting to understand some of the issues, within your design teams about things like designing for repairability and durability. Also, perhaps how you communicate these down through your supply chains, for example, to Asia, how you go about that. Collecting better life cycle data and thinking about how you will record, analyze, and communicate that. Start getting a feel about the impact of any unsold or returned stock within your value chain, particularly for retailers. And next slide, please. So green public procurement, again, firstly assessing whether you supply to the public sector, and then if you did get more requirements to improve the environmental performance of your textiles products, for example, workwear, etc., whether you would be able to, respond to that effectively. And again, there is issues there in terms of understanding your life cycle impacts. And again, building on probably your existing chemicals, tracking systems, and keeping account of any new and revised regulations that may well come out of the ESPR. Next slide, please. So there's a range of other regulation that out there that isn't within the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation, that we're unclear how aligned they are and how much the conversations are going on between the those that are developing, the elements of ESPR and those that metaphorically or own, waste labeling regulation, the Waste Framework Directive, etc. Next slide, please. So textiles labeling regulation. So there are, there's activity going on to harmonise labelling of textiles products, to fundamentally bring in new, information related to sustainability, circularity, care, alongside already mandatory disclosure of fibre composition. So as we understand it, there is a proposed revision that is planned for the fourth quarter 2025. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So key element, back one slide. Key element there is that there is a revision to the Waste Framework Directive, and again, for time, I'm not going to read through this. Already, there is a requirement in member states for the separate collection, of textiles. but there is a proposals to bring in EPR for textiles across the member states. And the timelines for this effectively was that, as we understand it, the Environment Committee approved this in July, and there is then going to be a plenary discussion in the Parliament in September with a view to taking things forward. Next slide, please. So there are already national schemes in place for textiles in France, Netherlands, Italy, Latvia, and Hungary. And there are other developments in emerging in other countries. Next slide, please. France is the most evolved, and it started its activities around many aspects of linked to textiles in 2007. And then it upgraded these in an anti-waste for a circular economy law in 2020. So some of the elements of the activities, within France is unusually there is just one producer responsibility organization for France, whereas in other countries and other sectors there are multiple so-called producer responsibility organizations. So Refashion is the main or the PRO in France. And within the French approach, they've also effectively brought in eco-modulation fees, which effectively give bonuses for improved performance in a nutshell. So, for example, you can potentially get a reduced fee in relation to your producer responsibility obligations in the sector if, for example, you produce the products to be more durable. The value of that eco-modulation or the percentage is quite small, I understand, at the moment, but again may well be one of the topics that will be looked at in more detail as things progress. So the important point here is giving bonuses for improved performance. Next slide, please. So there's obviously a series of implications coming out of this in terms of issues to do with waste prevention, linking back into starting to think about design. 80% of products' environmental impact is determined at the design stage. So how can you design for repairability unless you're thinking about it then? But also the whole issue of take back, separation, recycling of textiles is bubbling up as a more of a European topic. Next slide, please. In the UK, as a non-member state, there is activity in place, we understand, with some work going on within RAP, with a view to a consultation in late 2025, early 2026. Has been discussion in the past, but this is our knowledge as at this moment in time. Next slide, please. Can't get my words out. So waste shipment regulation. So effectively, this is some regulation that aims to supervise and control waste shipment and the export of textiles waste. It entered into force in May 2024, and most provisions will apply from 2026. So there's effectively, a policy in place to try and reduce the export of textiles waste. There's questions there about how this will align with the Waste Framework Directive in terms of recycling and reuse and keeping those textiles and clothing within the European circular economy. Next slide, please. Again, there is a real need to sort of monitor, what is going on here, particularly if textiles are disposed of directly or indirectly overseas, and to particularly put in place the appropriate monitoring and paperwork and data related to this area. Next slide, please. So, of Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, while it's not explicitly focused on this sector, is an area of quite significant development with a lot of discussion, and the regulation aims to require companies to disclose risks and opportunities associated with environmental and social issues. And clearly, as with textiles and clothing as a major topic, as a major global sector with life cycle, with a lot of the production emerging overseas or happening overseas, this has big implications. As at this moment in time, only companies with over 1,000 employees will come under the CSRD. Next slide, please. Again, quite significant implications for those large brands, more requirements on monitoring environmental performance. Next slide, please. The Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive effectively, aims to make, companies accountable for the impact in terms of human rights and the environment, and again has significant implications for companies in the clothing sector due to its significant global supply chain. Next slide, please. But the key issue is, and next slide, please. These have ended up being quite controversial, with perhaps the ripple effects going on from over the pond in related to a variety of environmental and social issues, as well as simplification and competitiveness issues that are particularly watchwords within the Commission. And effectively, both these regulations have come on something called the omnibus, that is leading to likely slowing down of the process, and perhaps weakening some of the requirements for companies, and particularly placing some of those requirements into the future. Again, quite confusing, difficult to monitor, part of the challenge, but this is something that companies should keep an eye on, particularly in this sector, because of the global nature of the sector. Next slide, please. So empowering consumers for the green transition. Effectively, this is a piece of regulation that came into place last year, that was from an untraditional part of the, in terms of policy, in the green sense. So it came from DG Justice and Consumers, and effectively it's going to place a lot more requirements in terms of effectively greenwashing and green claims. So the member states will have to create plans for 2026. The requirements are likely to come into place at the back end of 2026. So next slide, please. Already some member states had similar regulations, and for example, Belgium is already preparing for preparation for this, for the regulation. And as we understand it, there are government bodies already starting to audit retailers in terms of checking labels and messaging, for example. So this is part of the wave of activities around information reporting and labeling and strengthening this. Why is this important? Well, the clothing and textiles sector, fashion sector, is unfortunately stated as being in various objective reports as being very high on greenwashing, activities. So it's important that that is now sort of tightened up, and regulation is coming in relation to it. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, where everybody will receive the record. So the other key point here is not to confuse that existing regulation with something called the Green Claims Directive. So the Green Claims Directive was a policy put forward on the third-party verification of labels. And again, there was a significant political objections within the policy process to this. And the EC announced that this policy would be withdrawn But then particularly Ursula von der Leyen stated clearly that this is still being supported within the system. So it's very confusing as to the precise process on this, but again, it is part of the overall, drive to strengthen, labeling and product-related communications in the sector. Next slide, please. I'll try and move through the rest of this very quickly. So in terms of standards in the sector, it splits broadly, next slide, please, into a whole series of regulations, a whole series of ISO standards related broadly to sustainability or circularity of clothing and textiles. I'm not going to read through all of these. Next slide, please. But many of these are not necessarily well known. Many people in the sector don't necessarily know, particularly some of the newer developments are happening outside of the more technical standards. So for example, the SEN Technical Group 202248 is devising, for example, a new standard on design for circularity for the sector. So there is a fair amount of activity already happening within standardization at ISO and SEN level. Next slide, please. There is also national standards in the UK and other places, and indeed the UK, for example, is putting together a mirror committee for all the relate to all the standards related to the circular economy because of the increased interest and policy activities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So on a broader basis, there are a series of circular economy standards out there that aren't, again, sector specific, but again, may well be very relevant for textiles and clothing companies that want to increase their activities around circularity. So UK published the first management standard through BSI, related to circular economy in 2017, about providing guidance on how to implement circular economy aspects within within organizations. Next slide, please. There have now been a series of standards published within ISO the majority were published last year, the middle of the last year. Effectively now what's in place is the first two main standards related to terminology and the transitioning towards circular business models will now move into a revision process with a revision of the content by 2028. So there are standards out there, but they are now going to move into a revision process. Next slide, please. There are new proposals out there at an ISO level on extended producer responsibility, value networks, and also circular economy management system standard. Next slide, please. Within SEN, there is now a mirror group or mirror technical committee on circular economy, TS473. And next slide, please. And there are working groups working on a variety of topics, as we have here. The first two ones are trying to align the ISO standards to European developments and new standards in relation to information sharing, new working groups in the development process on extended producer responsibility and remanufacturing. Next slide, please. Another standard to be aware of is, or set of standards, is the SEN JTC 10 around materials efficiency, and these standards effectively related to product circularity of particularly energy-related products. Next slide, please. But with the extended ESPR, the Commission have highlighted that these standards will be needed to be broadened to cover all products, all sectors. And one notable standard that had started to look at this area was Working Group 8, which is the first standard around circular design at a design and development level. Next slide, please. As mentioned, there is a circular design standard, broad-based one there, but also it's indicating the direction of travel here. There is also an existing set of standards that link to circular design in various forms of all things, the fishing gear sector, which for those who are on the call coming from the textile sector will have an interest in because of the use of polymers. Next slide, please. So that this particular standard was published November, I think, last year, if I remember rightly, and really provides guidance on how to bring circularity into design and development processes. Next slide, please. It's a very practical guidance standard that links back to many of the other elements of the JCT 10. Next slide, please. There are already existing eco-design standards out there at an IC level, 62430 that cover how to do eco-design, are broader than circular design at a design and development level, and ISO 14006 that indicate how to incorporate eco-design into environmental management systems, into ISO 14001 and quality standards as well. So this is really, you've got a product development and design standard and a management standard. Next slide, please. So coming to the end, it's a lot of activity going on, as you can hear. Trying to keep up to date with it. It's very challenging for myself and Virginie and my other colleague. So we welcome, any comments, any information on this. This is also a complex activity both in the policy side and also the standards side. So if you're an SME, we highlight maybe, that, and if you're particularly engaged with Europe, that really you start to bring this as a board level discussion, start to monitor activities, mainly if you don't have a sustainability or environmental manager. You start to think about maybe allocating somebody a day a week or half a day a week. You really start to monitor the regulations that are going to impact on you, and you also start to think about the issues in relation to different parts of the business, from planning, design, procurement, etc. So, and you also may start to check out, excuse me, your suppliers' awareness of a lot of these issues. Next slide, please. So we've got a series of other details here that again will be in the information, the recording supplied to you. So I don't plan to go into further details because I think we've covered those. So next slide, please. So again, we've tried to align some of the requirements for companies to start to think about this. So next slide, please. So thanks very much for your patience. I think we've managed to sort of keep most of you here. I know it's a lot of information. I think we might be able to go on to a couple minutes more beyond the end of the session if we have questions or comments. And that is not just on anything that has been put in the overview here, but also any questions on the standards for BSI or more broadly on the project. We have colleagues from the Just Fashion on the call as well. So maybe we can share the screen, Virginie, and stop sharing. And if anybody wants to, has posed a question or wants to ask a question, please put your hand up and we can try and help answer those questions. And again, bearing in mind my experience in these meetings, if you don't want to ask any specific questions in the public domain, you can email us and we can forward it to relevant people, as you wish. So I'm not seeing any hands emerge. So I don't know, as we got a couple minutes more. I don't know.
There is a question on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. Just reading. I think it's from George. It's asked, to what extent do current ESPR proposals consider customer behavior? For example, washing frequency, improper care, when defining durability, and how might this be accounted for in standardized durability testing?
So those are the sorts of issues that the JRC are tackling at the moment. So, and those are within the research they are doing. So I can't answer that question at the moment. We will try and see if we can get a JRC person onto another webinar, but those are exactly the sorts of issues that they're working through at the moment. We have heard that there is other work going on in other areas looking at things like indices and scoring methods for durability, but it's a very challenging area for a variety of reasons. So sorry, watch this space, I would say. Any other points in the chat, or anybody any other questions? If not, I don't know if Sarah or David, you wanted to say anything, and then if colleagues from the Just Fashion project wanted to sort of just maybe make a couple of comments at the end, if you're still on the call. So Sarah or David.
I think the only thing I wanted to say, thank you very much, by the way, Martin, that was really very comprehensive. And I understand that you're covering international and European standards most effectively there, but there are a few others, obviously, in the national area, which you might, nationally in the UK, which are also used internationally around remanufacturing and reconditioning. There's something called the BS8 777 series, which runs to many parts, which is a lot of stuff about remanufacturing, reconditioning, which may well be a useful reference when a lot of this work in the SEN group comes up. And also, as I noticed that David put into the chat, we're always very keen to speak to people who are have an interest in standards development in this space. We very much welcome your comments and your perceptions in this area if you wanted to, if you have an interest in inputting into any of that work, because we can certainly point you in the right direction. If you're not based in the UK, you can certainly go through your own national bodies into the work, and we can certainly help you to do that, and to find the right people to talk to. So that's just a point about getting involved in standards internationally and you're in the European sphere specifically. Otherwise, I don't think I have anything particular to add, apart from the fact that obviously we're working very closely with Martin, who's the chair of our UK Committee of Circular Economy, to look at this textiles area, and we're looking at doing something for small businesses around which will hopefully be much more, it should in fact be broader based, that it's not just a national piece. It will obviously address some of the things that Martin covered, and we'll be looking at circularity for the clothing industry, particularly for smaller organisations, and what they need to do. So that's a guide that we're hoping to publish in the autumn. So that's just me. Anything from David? Sorry.
No, nothing really, Sarah. I'll just add that apart from what I posted and Sarah said then in terms of participating in standardisation, maybe by being part of the UK committee, which then, as Martin was saying, provides the means by which you can then influence European international standards. Even if you felt on the call here that was maybe too much of a commitment, all of our standards, all standards that are developed at European, international, national level, all go out for public consultation and comment. So just by following BSI or BSI sustainability on LinkedIn, for example, when a document is ready for public comment, we will promote that, and therefore that's a chance for you to at least see what's there in the draft and say, I like this bit I think needs more clarity, and that all goes back to the committee, the UK committee that Martin chairs, and the other committees that are working on other related topics, and then all of your comments help make that document stronger. So there's different ways in which you can participate and lean into this process.
So just a couple of points there. There are people from multiple countries on the thing. So the same principle, is true for, I'm sure, all the national standards bodies in your own countries. I'm sure they will be very keen to get you engaged in your circular economy and also textiles groups. I know, for example, in Germany, there is a lot of activity within the textiles and circularity aspect. And just picking up, you brought up a good point there, Sarah, in terms of actual remanufacturing. Although remanufacturing is perhaps slightly lower down the agenda, it is an area where in the ESBR there is confusing text in that some people have really brought out that there's this issue between remanufacturing and reconditioning. So it's another example of where terminology is a problem. But also I do know that a company called Oakdean Hollins, a company in the UK, did quite a lot of work some time ago, I'm sure with other international partners, around the remanufacturing of clothing and textiles. I see Jan's hand is up.
Yeah, just thank you so much. Just to let you know that I sent some links in the chat here. And amazing, Martin. Thank you so much for this very instructive and helpful presentation. Thank you. Great work.
Thanks very much. Are there any more questions or observations in the chat, Virginie?
Yeah, some people are sharing some interesting information, like so we have, for example, Hildy that shares a document database of regulation. That sounds quite interesting to share later. Some are asking some resources for designers that are looking to export to the EU. If there's any particular resources that we could recommend.
So I think
Major.
those are sort of quite general questions. There are multiple sort of eco-design standards and tools out there. I mean, there are some that are customized to the sector. We've got our own tools, and indeed that's an area that is also being developed within the Just Fashion project. So again, that might be something where we can hook those particular people to the relevant people that are looking at that area. We have, for example, have our own product circularity for fashion and clothing companies tool that is, open access tool, particularly geared towards, micro and SMEs. So we can target those points to different, the relevant people. Maybe again, before we close, maybe the people who are asking that can make sure they put their email related to their request, so that we can then link people together effectively. So I don't know. I saw that the project director, Anik, had to move to the Just Fashion project director had to move to another meeting. I don't know, Paz, if you wanted to say anything, or if not, so Paz also has to move to another meeting. So effectively, I think for everybody's time, thank you very much for your participation and engagement. And there will be more of these webinars, perhaps hopefully a little bit less rushed and more opportunity to go into a bit more detail. So in September, we're going to, we'll be running one directly on the eco-design for sustainable products, regs. And, again, what we're trying to do within the project is track the new developments, bring in the new information as it evolves, and keep on top of this, and trying to unpick some of the complexity and uncertainty. So anyway, thank you for bearing with us, and I'm pleased that the technology worked, and I wish everybody a good rest of the afternoon, and thank you very much. And we will circulate a link to the recording. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Merci.